This is a remarkable man. I'm so pleased to introduce you. I also get to share a tiny little secret with you. Today, he launches a new company called Beyond. Congratulations and welcome, Bob Carr. And our moderator, Gerhard, will be with him to have a fireside chat.
Which slide would you like, sir?
Go ahead. How old are you?
71.
71. And you want to start a new company now after you have had that huge success. Why?
Because the scholarship program that we started in 2003 has been marvelously successful, changed the lives of families, and I want to do more of that. And in order to do that, I need more money. So I need to start a new company, and which is going to be primarily owned by the foundation.
So explain the model, the background for the model that you've created. You grew up in the inner city of Chicago, and you had a fairly difficult upbringing with a father that was borderline abusive, and you survived all that, and then somebody believed in you.
Well, a lot of people grew up a lot worse than I did, for sure, and we've learned that a lot over the last few years working with children of incarcerated parents and foster children. Somebody in my high school decided I should be one of two people to get a $250 scholarship. And so a long, long time ago, I got this scholarship for $250. And it was a lot of money then, but it wasn't enough to put you through college. But it certainly was recognition. And I just thought that was, somebody who I didn't even know, and I still don't know, decided to do that. And so I went back to the women's club who gave me the scholarship like 25 years later. It took me 25 years to be able to do this. And I gave them $5,000. And they said I was the first person in 53 years to ever give back. And so we started a bigger program. It was their 100th anniversary. And that program now has generated 1,568 kids who are in our program across 7 states in the country. And what we want to do is prove that helping these children of incarcerated parents and foster kids, if you invest in these kids early enough, and keep them, give them the right mindset, which is why I'm so interested in your program, that it makes such a huge difference. And hopefully legislatures will redirect funding in the future, and we're trying to create a model that's going to have that much of an impact.
Is there a bar for... Is there a barrier to entry in form of B+ averages or something like that?
We'll take young people as young as 4th grade if we have a community-based organization to work with, which is a big if. Not a lot of communities have such organizations yet. But as long as the student has a positive attitude and feels like they have a good chance to be successful academically, then we will mentor them. We'll make sure they take honors English and AP history and calculus, things that they don't take now. They don't think about that. Kids get to 9th grade and they're already sort of out of the loop because they don't take the right courses. So by mentoring them from an early age on, we can get them into the right courses. And most people are smart enough to get a B average in high school, and that's our requirement. You have to have a B average. In the Chicago area where we started the program, we had 60 graduates from our program that were chosen in 9th grade 3 years ago. All 60 of them are going to college. We didn't lose one kid who didn't get into college.
So you have started Heartland Payment Systems when?
I started my company in 1972 when I was a lot younger. But Heartland was formed. I merged my company, Credit Card Software, with Heartland Bank in 1997.
And through developing sales, you have created a company that had an enormous amount of value and you sold it last year in April. And in the process, you created 350 millionaires?
Well, they created themselves as millionaires.
Right.
We just gave them the opportunity to take what they built and monetize the residual value of what they built and allowed them to buy stock before we went public.
Right.
And when we went public, so they did it themselves. We created the opportunity.
Right.
And that's one of my things.
So you also created the salesperson's Bill of Rights. And that struck me as very unusual that an owner of a company tells salespeople, here are your rights. And one of the most amazing things, and you outlined it in the 8 steps to revolutionize your sales model, is the residual value that salespeople create when they sell to a customer and then get compensated for that. How did he come up with that?
Well, Henry David Thoreau was one of my heroes in college. I loved everything he wrote. And one of the things he said was, if you build a better mousetrap, they'll beat a path to your door. That wasn't working for me as a sales approach. So, I'm basically was an IT guy by training, and I wrote software for 25 years. And it was good stuff, but, I couldn't get sales. So I had to figure out, how do you build a sales model that works for all parties when you don't have a lot of cash up front. And in the process, it took us 10 years to figure it out. But in 1994, we sort of got the magical pieces put together, and that sales model is still in place today. And it really works well. And here's the point I want to make. And I know this is hard to understand, especially if you're not in senior management, but our company sold for 5 times revenue. So if you make a sale, let's say a $1,000 sale, just to have an example, and that $1,000 account helped us get $5,000 more for our company, why wouldn't you share a little bit of that with the salesperson who brought that to you? I don't understand why people look at it the way they did. But I also know that for 25 years, I failed to convince any banker that it made sense to pay a signing bonus up front where you had negative cash flow for a year and you didn't make any money until the 15th month. But if you're making money in the 15th month and you're going to get 60 months in the value of your company, why is that such a bad deal? So companies go out all the time and pay multiples of revenue for accounts, but the organization won't pay a tenth of that or a fifth of that to the salesperson who spent their time and money, mostly, to generate that account. So that's the difference in philosophy. And I've decided after sitting around for a year, my non-compete ended at midnight, and I accepted this invitation before I really had decided to start a new company. I just feel like this will work in a lot of other companies. And getting to start a brand new company from scratch, we're going to have all of our employees are going to own stock in the company, every single one of them that comes to work for us this year. And they're going to have residual value that they can convert to stock in the company, and we're going to do really well again.
So that philosophy that you have is very generous, and it's very inclusive, because you're thinking beyond yourself, and that requires that mindset shift. The question is, who taught you that, or what experience sparked that innovation?
I think out of necessity. I don't do these things out of because I want to be a generous person. I do it because I think this is the best way for me to make a lot of money. I mean, really, Zig Ziglar said it, right? The best way to make money is to help other people make money. And this is part of it. It's not rocket science.
Right. So describe a little bit we understand the philosophy, but describe the model that you have created for the sales organization. And what advice would you have for sales leaders in this room to think about so that they can duplicate or integrate certain parts of your 8-step model into their sales organization?
Well, I think it comes down to the basics. What is a customer worth? And why is that customer going to continue to do business with your company? And if the person who sold the account, you want them to continue with you. You want them to be there to service that account and to continue to generate orders from that account. If you're in a recurring revenue business like we were, and that's a big part of this, we're in a recurring revenue business where people took credit cards, take credit and debit cards every single day, and as long as they continue processing, you're going to make money, processing those transactions. But the same thing is true in other businesses where you have repeat business. It doesn't have to be a recurring revenue business for this model to work. That was my aha moment over this last year when I've been sitting around thinking about things, is that this model will work in non-recurring, in businesses where you resell, the same customers buy from you over and over again. So you need to find a way to make it possible for salespeople to survive. And the salary and bonus model is different from an all-commission model. The very best salespeople, in my experience, want to be on an all-commission model. And so that's we're directed towards that. The salary bonus model can work too, but that does change the dynamics of what I'm talking about here. So I think you want to have an attractive organization for people to work at. And a couple of the big mistakes that I mentioned that in the 8 points here is companies change the sales comp model. The new CEO comes in, the new CFO comes in, the new CSO comes in, and what do? The first thing they do, they change the sales model. And when you have a lot of turnover in the C-suite, you have a lot of turnover and changes in the comp model. And one of the things I think that's really important is you need to have your employees trust you, that they're not going to get, be mistreated. And what's one of the first things most companies do? You hit your quota this year. Oh, so now we're going to double your quota and we're going to cut your territory in half. You're going to try to get that 200% growth and cut your people by 30%. I hope that's, well, let's put it this way. That's not going to happen in my company. But I'm 71 and I'm thinking 5 years now. I'm not thinking 50 years anymore.
So let's look at other factors, which is the motivation of salespeople. How do you reward them and give them not just a financial ownership stake, but also what do you do on the feel-good side?
Well, I think you set goals for people and you help, you said it earlier, the bigger the why, the bigger the try. To make sure that every person has a realistic view of what's possible out there and have them set high goals and ask them to define why are they doing this? Some people are attracted to what I'm doing now because they love the idea that the profits that are created from their work are going to help children of incarcerated parents go to college. And that's a pretty big deal for a lot of us, for a lot of people, especially millennials. It's one reason I'm so confident this model is going to work and be transformative, hopefully for, one of the things that I'm getting off track here a little bit, but one of the things I hope comes out of what we're doing is that people who make a lot of money, there's thousands of billionaires now out there, all obviously pretty smart people, been successful, obviously have lots of money. Why don't they take that energy and do a company that is owned by a foundation doing great things, or a nonprofit that's doing great things? The Gates are sort of doing that, right? The Gates family, Warren Buffett. So why not do it? Why not do that on a smaller scale? It's so, my goal, frankly, is to generate $1 million of cash per week for my foundation. Do you know how much good that can do? And there's a heck of a lot of people with a heck of a lot more money, than I've got. And I think that should be a new focus for business in America. The motto that we're running by different experts is this tagline: business responsibility, or corporate responsibility, is our DNA. And that's what it is. Our people really love this idea of creating value for people who, are on the other side of this gap of income.
So what you're saying is, like, when I think of Salesforce and they have a Salesforce Foundation, which is a sideshow, what you're doing is you put your foundation on the same platform as your business.
That's right. That's right.
That's a revolutionary thought.
I'm not sure if it's revolutionary. I just hope it works and that other people do it if it does.
Right. So why do you say I eliminate all territories?
Well, we hired consultants, and boy, it's really amazing how wrong consultants can be. And they're so confident about themselves all the time. And I've been a consultant, so I'm one of you too. But it's you talked about it. It's Sales 3.0. What business person on Main Street doesn't have a brother-in-law somewhere else in the country, or a son or a father, mother, somewhere else in the country, and we sell by our network? If people trust and believe in somebody, they're going to recommend them. That was talked about last night. How do you measure your success with your customers? And the answer is, are they recommending you to their friends and family? That's what you want. So if you eliminate that and say, hey, you can't go across the street and make a sale to the twin brother across the street, that doesn't make sense. And that's why I think the internet has limited the value of having territories and made it into a negative. A lot of salespeople absolutely, they hate the idea of being limited to a territory.
Let me ask you a question of the audience, show of hands. How many of you have a sales compensation model where it is commission only? So what is the wisdom of commission only?
People who want to make a lot of money tend to want to have a commission only job because they can get better results that way for the same performance. But it's not as common as it used to be. I do think the concepts here, though, are still basically accurate, but the amounts of money that are set aside, have to be less because there's an overhead now in employing a sales organization. I mean, there always is overhead, even if it's.
So how do you help them in the critical first 3 months?
Pay them signing bonuses and pay them based upon the proper types of activity, such as making real appointments and going to see real prospects. Because if a person does that properly, they're going to be a successful commission salesperson. And sometimes you give, bridge salaries, things like that.
So today you have a press release that goes out, talks about your new company. How many people work for your company right now, or to start out? Is it yourself? Or?
6 months ago, it was me. Now we're starting off with about 50 people.
Starting today?
Yes.
First day, congratulations.
The press release comes out in 15 minutes.
Oh, it's not official yet, right. I want to give the audience a chance to ask questions. I don't want to monopolize here.
I think since the vast majority of us don't have a comp plan like the one that you're suggesting, how would you suggest to an organization to go about changing that? When do they start?
That's a really fair and good question. How does a company start that doesn't have that? First of all, you have to have a board of directors and a chief executive officer who believe in it. And that's pretty hard to get because it's just a different way of looking at things. Like I said, it took me 25 years to find anybody that would give me any money based on this model because it just doesn't make sense. It's not an inherently understandable type approach. So I think you have to have the people at the top who are really setting the policy for the company need to have say, hey, what we're doing isn't working. There needs to be a better way to do it, and they need to be sincere about that. And I think this could be put into a company, gradually. It doesn't have to be an overnight transformation. But so I'm appealing really to people who are starting a new company or thinking about starting a new company. If you start it off right and allocate a certain portion of the ownership of the company to the people who build the company, why shouldn't the people who build the company? This idea of the Harvard Business School, all respect to Harvard, is that the purpose of a company is to make the stockholders the most possible money. That's bullshit. That's what's wrong with capitalism in this country. It's been abused and it needs to change. But most people who are running companies would completely disagree with what I just said. But if you don't believe in it and you're going to be a CEO or a chief sales officer of a company, this model can work. And I would be happy to talk to people about that offline.
So is the objection that we don't want socialism? Is that like...
This isn't socialism. This is just taking the people at the top, we move some people up to the top or up to the middle class or the upper middle class. This is nothing like socialism. You're paying the people who are building something, they're getting part of the benefit of it.
Right.
Just because somebody has $1 million and puts it in the company, why should that person be protected and have the whole purpose of the company to make that person 18% return a year instead of 12, and you screw over your employees to do that? I don't get that logic at all. That does not work long term.
Question.
We have a no territory model as well, and the only downside we've experienced is some competition internally over certain accounts. Just speak to some best practices as to how you've handled that as you've grown the organization.
It's a nasty problem and it's very difficult. And one way to handle it, and I'm not saying it's perfect, is to have a Salesforce type tool where people identify active prospects they're working on and prove that they're actively working on them. And if a person does have a legitimate prospect in process that they're pitching, then they need to have a reasonable amount of time, not forever, to close that deal. And that's the way we tried to do it. It's not perfect, but it's the best way we know how. And you're right, that is the downside of it, not having territories.
So why do you think that so many VCs would not like your model? Is it greed?
Well, greed is good, I guess, according to Gordon Gekko. I don't think it's greed. I think it's their mission in life is to get the highest return, and they measure return one way, EPS. And so a lot of really brilliant people, they only have 3 letters in their alphabet, E, P, and S, but there's a lot of other things in this world that are important and have long-term benefits.
Right.
And so it's because of the focus on EPS.
I hear a message about healing corporate America. What are you doing, Bob, to get that message out there? Because that sounds like one hell of an important message right now. I'm working for, personally, one of the biggest companies in tech, and I can tell you it sure needs a lot of healing.
Tammy, that's a way beyond my pay grade. But, I accepted this invitation from Gerhard. Who wouldn't want to accept an invitation from Gerhard? I think we've been doing this off and on for 10 years or so, right? This is one way to do it. This is all I know. I have written 2 books. I meant to bring them with me to hold them up. There's about 100 copies out front that are free. They're signed, and please one book is called Through the Fires, which is the story of Heartland, basically. And then the second book is Working Class to College, The Promise and Peril for Working Class America. And that's all about the foundation and the work there. We're working on a 3rd book now, my co-author and I, and the 4th book is going to be about this very particular topic after I've had a couple years under my belt. But people like you can help Tammy, and everybody else, many of you in the room can do the same thing, help with this.
I think we need to create a sign like this sign, no EPS mindset. The end of the EPS mindset. Lee.
How did I find out about a co-author? We hired a speaker to come to one of our annual summits. And after he came to a couple of summits and said, Bob, you need to be writing a book. And I said, I don't know how it's going to end yet, so I can't write the book. And he said, no, you need to write a book. And he introduced me to a friend of his who was a New York Times writer. And I hired him about 4 years ago to write. And he's a great writer, a great thinker. And even though he was at the New York Times, he and I get along fine.
Question?
You had some comments at point number 7 about giving salespeople the opportunity for management.
Yes. What you hear every time from a consultant is, and it just makes me want to gag every time I hear this, well, a salesperson doesn't make a good sales manager. Well, how do you know unless you try? So in our model, we made it very easy for a sales rep to try at management if they wanted to. And if they didn't work out, they were able to keep their job. In a lot of companies, somebody gets promoted to the next level, and if it doesn't work out, they get fired, and you lose a good employee. I can tell you from experience that many good salespeople make good sales managers. And so why not give people a try if they're not going to do any damage to your company in the process? And that's been our experience, and I'm a big believer in that.
How do you decide to work in the corporate responsibility into the sales pitch? Is that something that you talk about or not talk about?
We don't talk, well, we tell our people not to talk about it, but of course salespeople are going to do what they want to anyway most of the time. Is we want our products and services to stand on their own so the customers don't feel like, hey, I'm getting lesser of a product or a service, or I'm paying more for something because these guys, are, wanting to help these kids. But many customers, especially I think the younger they get, the millennials especially, they definitely are interested in cause-based companies, being partners with cause-based companies. But I do think the sales presentation to the customer needs to be based completely on the product. If you look at our logos, which I would have had a slide, our logos, Beyond has the arrow pointing to the right. The Give Back logo has the arrow pointing backwards. And so we bring out those logos together and people get the message real quick.
We have one more question, sir.
How do you go about expanding the Give Back initiative in new metropolitan areas? Do you have a champion or mentor for each city?
I'm sorry, would you ask that again?
You mentioned in Chicago you have the scholarship program, right?
The scholarship program is in 7 states: California, Illinois, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware.
How do you go about expanding that?
We go about expanding that by getting people to donate money so that we can prepay college educations, and this is a unique model in the country from what I can know. We write a check to a university for $1 million up front. And the deal is that they're going to take $20,000, $5,000 a year over 4 years out of that $1 million, and they'll pay all the other costs of that kid. We only pick Pell Grant eligible kids. Most of our kids are in states where there's also a state money involved. Our foster kids, there's Chafee grants from the federal government for foster kids. So between the funding that's available for these kids, that's usually $10,000 or $15,000 a year total, plus our $5,000, and then the school matches the rest of it. Chapman University in Orange, California, their tuition is $66,000 a year. They're getting $5,800 from the Pell Grant, $7,900 from California, our $5,000. They're covering the rest. Why? Because these universities want these kids who don't have a chance in life, much less to ever get to their school. And so our kids we pay room, board, tuition, and fees, and the students work part-time to pay for their books and their travel back and forth. So we prepay, we have $40 million out now to universities around the country, prepaying seats for these kids to come. We pick them as ninth graders, we mentor them through high school, make sure they stay on track, and then they start off in college. So it's a unique model, but we've been doing this now for 4 years, and it works really, really nicely. Thank you. I think we're done.
I want to conclude by saying that you're setting an amazing role model for the rest of corporate America. And I think the core message is that you remind people that chasing money alone is going to get you only so far, but there's no limit to where you can go when you chase meaning at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.